Y'all, I was tagged in this post on Twitter. This person, Shannon, said, "This is New Hampshire Republican State Representative Jess Edwards arguing in favor of child marriage this week and referring to girls as ripe and fertile." She says, "Thankfully, the bill passed. Child marriage will soon be illegal in New Hampshire." So I immediately went to the Google machine to find the whole article. Okay, so let's get into this one from the Raw Story. GOP lawmaker complains new marriage bill will make ripe and fertile teens get some abortions. There was an audible gasp when he mentioned the words ripe and fertile. During a debate in the New Hampshire House of Representatives this week, Republican State Representative Jess Edwards voiced his opposition to a bill setting the minimum age of 18 because it would induce ripe and fertile 16 and 17-year-olds to have some more abortions instead of settling down and having a family. The remarks were reported by the New Hampshire Bulletin following extensive and spirited debate that ultimately saw the bill pass the state house. The legislation would replace current state law that allows 16 and 17-year-olds to get married if they have the consent of a guardian. If we continually restrict the freedom of marriage as a legitimate social option, when we do this to people who are ripe, fertile age, and may have a pregnancy and a baby involved, are we not, in fact, making abortion a much more desirable alternative when marriage might be the right solution for some freedom loving couples? The fact that he was perfectly fine with saying this on camera just shows how literally obtuse or oblivious they are to the changing of times. No, we are not in a time 100 years ago, 70 years ago, where teenagers were compelled to get married. No, old man. Edwards' remarks in the New Hampshire House, a place known for its colorful political antics, provoked a strong reaction on social media, including from multiple of his colleagues in the legislature. That was kind of written a little funny. This is the freaking mentality that we have to deal with in New Hampshire. Children, girls, should be allowed to get married because they are ripe and fertile, wrote State Representative Wendy Thomas. Looking for groomers, look no further. I'm tired of being called a groomer when Republicans are the ones fantasizing about fertile teenagers and demanding legal child marriage, wrote a fellow state representative, Alessandra Murray, an openly transgender and non binary community organizer who has worked on some abortion access. Anyway, they lost. Once the new signs SB 359, child marriage will finally be illegal in the state of New Hampshire. Females are walking fertile vessels to these creeps, wrote local special educator Leah Benson. Some of the reaction on the Twitter, Jenny said, "Now who are the rumors and Fritos? Nurses against D-Pics, they say they are all showing their true colors." Ken Gordon says, "Child marriage is legal in Tennessee and Alabama. In Tennessee, you can marry your first cousin. In Alabama, the state has higher standards. You can marry your second cousin." John Collins says, "This is all sorts of effed up." Branded Pig says, "Solves the abortion problem." Okay, so I guess he's going for the same thing Jess is going for. M. Jupiter says, "I was shocked at the way he describes the young as ripe and fertile. Sounds like a Frito." Sally is just wondering, how do these disgusting people keep getting elected? I'll never understand this country. Neither will I. Let's watch the video.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for taking my question. Do you agree with the point of view that if we continually restrict the freedom of marriage as a legitimate social option, when we do this to people who are of ripe fertile age, and may have a pregnancy and a baby involved, are we not in fact making abortion a much more desirable alternative when marriage might be the right solution for some freedom-loving couple? Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for taking my question.
NPR had some great news articles yesterday. This article, "Pregnant Women in Missouri Can't Get Divorced. Critics Say It Fuels DV." She describes a scene of emotional abuse, pregnant with her third child. Her husband yelled at her while her older two kids listened in the car. He would call me awful things in front of them, and soon my son would call me those names too. She made up in her mind to leave, but when she went to a lawyer to file for divorce, she was told to come back when she was no longer pregnant. Destiny requested to be identified by her first name. She says she still lives with abusive threats from her ex husband. She couldn't end the marriage because Missouri law requires women seeking divorce to disclose whether they're pregnant, and state judges won't finalize divorces during a pregnancy. Established in the 70s, the rule was intended to make sure men were financially accountable for the children that they fathered. Advocates in Missouri are now pushing to change this law, arguing that it's being weaponized against victims of DV and contributes to the contraction of women's reproductive freedoms in a post Roe v. Wade landscape. In Missouri, it feels as though they have really closed down every door in terms of reproductive autonomy, says Kristen Mauricio, an attorney and expert in divorce law who has examined these kinds of laws in Missouri and other states. She says, beyond the legal and financial ties of marriage, there is a powerful emotional weight to legally terminating a marriage. You might just think, well, it's a piece of paper, she says, but that piece of paper tells you you're no longer in this horrible marriage and is really freeing for a lot of clients. After hearing stories about survivors unable to leave marriages, State Representative Ashley Ahn introduced House Bill 2402. It would allow pregnant women to finalize divorce in Missouri. Ahn says the law has gone unexamined for too long and that policymakers need to give women the right to leave dangerous or even life-threatening situations. How can you look at that person in the eye and say, no, I think you should stay with that person? That's wild to me. Another survivor of DV who asked to be identified by only her initial L because she says she's still in hiding from her ex husband, describes her encounter with the legal system when she tried to end her marriage. She had been holding on to the idea of filing for divorce as an emotional life raft for her and her child. When she finally pursued it, she says her lawyer told her it wasn't possible due to her pregnancy. I felt absolutely defeated in that moment. Elle returned to her abusive marriage to wait out her pregnancy. She says she slept on a tile floor in the basement the night before she gave birth because it was the only room in the house where there was a lock. Texas and Arkansas have similar laws. It's impossible to know how often women are unable to leave marriages due to pregnancy. Some people may not even try to file for divorce because of the law, as in Destiny's case. Lawyers might simply tell them to come back when they're not pregnant. Advocates in Missouri who work with the DV victims say they consistently see pregnant women who want to leave but can't. And they warn that it isn't as simple as just waiting out the pregnancy. When they do make that decision, it's a really big deal, says Megan Kosman, an advocate for victims at an organization called North Star Advocacy Center, north of Kansas City, Missouri. Kosman says it takes her clients a lot of courage and sometimes multiple attempts to leave. We have to honor that and respect that, she says, and work with them because they're ready in that moment to make that change. The opportunity might not present itself again. Reproductive restrictions as weapons. Another reason advocates say divorce laws like Missouri need to change, the law enables a form of abuse called reproductive coercion. The abusive partner utilizes pregnancy and children as a way to control their partner, explains Christina Cherry, a program manager at a DV housing program with Kansas City-based organization called Synergy Services. So here's Christina Cherry, and here's one of the offices that they're using as a shelter because they had to create something because they had to keep turning away women. On this day, Cherry stands inside an old Kansas City school that her organization is renovating to provide housing for survivors of DV. These units will be our 4-bedroom units, she says, gesturing to the vaulted ceiling in what was formerly the school's gymnasium. They will house families of 8. Cherry says they could potentially receive even bigger families. The organization decided to create its own housing after turning away too many families that needed housing, especially large families due to pregnancy forced on women by their abusers. They continue having children, but they can't afford them. They remain in poverty. Leaving a marriage, she says, becomes nearly impossible. Cherry says when she heard that the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, she immediately felt dread for her clients who would now have even less ability to control their pregnancies. Her organizations and others like it, turning away nearly 3,000 people who needed shelter last year in the Kansas City area. Missouri isn't the only place struggling with this issue in a post Roe world. We're seeing lots more people citing reproductive coercion, sexual coercion, and reproductive abuse or pregnancy coercion as part of their experience, says Miriam Durrani, Vice President of Policy for the National DV Hotline. Her organization reports a nearly 100% increase in hotline calls across the United States in the year after the Supreme Court ended the federal right to abortion. I mean, we are getting calls that are very explicitly like, I am pregnant, I am trying to escape. I cannot get resources where I am or in my state or my locality. The bill that would abolish Missouri's divorce rule isn't certain to pass. In Missouri, it's not clear whether On's legislation will pass, despite international media attention. I don't honestly feel very hopeful, says On, who notes that passing any kind of legislation is difficult for Democrats in Missouri's Republican dominated state house. On is more optimistic about the useful conversations she says she recently had with Missouri judges, who she hopes will be more aware of the dynamics around the abuse when making decisions involving divorce and pregnancy. The bill's passage, she says, is still possible in a future legislative session. It took Destiny 3 months after her baby was born to leave her husband. Her ex still has partial custody of the children, an arrangement she says is still very difficult to navigate, but her overwhelming feeling, she says, is of being free. She's proud of herself and of the person who was so strong and didn't even know at the time. So strong, she says, she saved herself and her children even without the support of her state. Please remember that these MFers who want to get rid of no fault divorce, that want to keep women trapped, are dooming women to harm and possible unaliving at the hands of these people. And they wonder why the birth rate will continue to fall, because I will continue to report on these types of things. Jump in the comments, let me know what you think about this one. Republicans showing once again how nonsensical many of them are. After a boom in cash aid to tackle poverty, some states are now banning it. Y'all know. Okay, let's just get into it. Dozens of cities and counties around the U.S. have been trying to tackle poverty by giving people no strings cash aid, an idea that gained traction after the success of stimulus checks and other federal relief during the pandemic. But advocates say over the past year, a backlash fueled by a conservative think tank has gained steam. Iowa is the latest Republican led state to prohibit the use of public money for a so called guaranteed income. The final vote last month wasn't close, but the debate was heated. Senators who support such programs said it was undemocratic to undermine local governments. One suggested colleagues were being hypocritical since their own families have received federal farm subsidies for generations. But State Senator Brad Zahn, who represents an area that is currently testing a basic income pilot, said he was shocked when the program was approved. He slammed the notion of giving people free money without requiring them to work, where before neighbors and churches and nonprofits really stepped up and helped people out. He said, now it's becoming more dependent on government and government tax dollars. In Texas, a similar bill to ban these programs didn't get far, so State Senator Paul Bettencourt took a different tack. He persuaded the state attorney general to file suit against a basic income program in Harris County, which includes Houston. You can't just give out money on the street like popcorn. You have to have a governmental reason, citing a gift clause in the state's constitution. Harris County attorney Christian Menifee disputes that, arguing the program serves a public purpose of reducing poverty and increasing economic opportunity. The Harris County pilot targets people who live in a certain high poverty zip codes, a population that's disproportionately Black and Hispanic. More than 8,200 people applied, then 1,900 were randomly selected to receive monthly payments. Beyond the constitutional question, Bencourt says this method of picking a lucky few winners by lottery is bad policy. He also concedes it wouldn't be possible to pay everyone who met the requirements, saying, even if you believed in public policy, you just simply run out of money. The backlash is a sign of how popular basic income programs have become. Basic income pilots have exploded since the pandemic. In part, that's because cities are using federal pandemic relief money to fund them, along with philanthropy, other private donors, and tax dollars. They usually pay low income people $500 to $1,000 a month for a year or so. These pilots are helpful and effective for families who need them, says Aditi Shrivastava, a deputy director for income security at the Center on Budget and Policies Priorities. Research finds participants are more financially secure and less stressed out, and that the monthly payments have no impact on employment. The lack of work requirement is a major selling point for supporters who say the extra cash can create the time and space to find a better job or perhaps a new direction. Most people are employed, though, often holding two jobs. Sharistava says those who don't work generally have a good reason. They may be taking care of family members. They may be dealing with disabilities. What we do know is the people who can work are already working. A conservative think tank has ramped up lobbying for bans on cash aid. In addition to Iowa, three other states, Arkansas, Idaho, and South Dakota, have banned no strings cash aid. Lawmakers in Wisconsin and Arizona did too, but Democratic governors vetoed those bills. So it says Arkansas, Idaho, and South Dakota. Hold on real quick. This is just a reminder that even the forced birther states had a drop in birth rate. I'm just showing you this because if these people really wanted the women in their states to have more babies, maybe they should actually think about how they are so antagonistic towards programs that would help people. I'm just keeping this in mind. These are the numbers of the birth rates from 2022 to 2023. And I had chosen Arkansas, Idaho, and I can't remember what the other one just said. But these numbers, even in forced birther states, they're going down because women are closing down their wombs, and money is one of the issues. Some states that are banning basic income don't actually have such programs. All of this is part of a coordinated push, said Harish Patel, a vice president with the Economic Security Project, which advocates for guaranteed income. He says the backlash is spearheaded by the lobbying arm of a conservative think tank, the Foundation for Government Accountability. They helicopter in, hire lobbyists in a bunch of states, and then they provide these copycat bills to undo this very popular program. The FGA did not make someone available for an interview, but among other issues, it promotes work requirements for federal safety net programs and opposes expanding Medicaid. During last year's congressional debt ceiling negotiations, the CEO suggested that new work requirements would ease worker shortages and decrease federal spending. The FGA is also among the many conservative groups that have contributed to Project 2025, which aims to set the agenda for a second Trump presidential term. Over the past year, a total of 10 states have introduced bills to ban basic income. We think that in the next year, they're probably going to go 25 to 30 states because they tested it out. People are going to stand up and fight back. Patel says his group's not yet published polling finds a majority support for basic income among not just Democrats but also independents and younger Republicans. Democratic pollster Celinda Lake has found a broad support for the idea of a federal guaranteed income program, something that many advocates say is their ultimate goal. The Texas legal challenge has had immediate consequences. Iowa Cash Aid Pilot has said it should be able to continue through its final payment in April 2025, since much of its funding is from private groups. But the lawsuit in Harris County, Texas, has had immediate consequences. Last month, the Texas Supreme Court temporarily blocked the program a day before the first $500 payments were supposed to go out. That left 56-year-old Carmela Valdez Nunez anxious and desperate. I just got to pay my rent and bills, she said. That's the thing I need because I don't want to be under the freeway. She thanks God she's never been homeless, but is behind on bills and worries about it a lot. Valdez Nunez used to clean offices and care for seniors, but she's disabled now and says she barely gets by on Social Security, a housing voucher, and $23 a month in food aid. I just buy eggs like tomatoes, onions, bread, bologna, and cheese. That's all I have enough to buy, and it only lasts a week. Valdez Nunez says she's gotten used to enduring hunger for long stretches. If the basic income program is allowed to go through, the first thing she'll buy is food. Just think about that. She said the first thing she'll buy is food. She also says she doesn't want to live under a bridge. This is what this money means to some of these people. And some of these GOP, some of these Christo fascists are so heartless and cruel that they want to deny poor people these basics. And in this world where the costs just keep going up and up and up, and wages are just stagnant to the point where they're basically going down, what do they expect? But we know that cruelty is the point. Jump in the comments, like, comment, share. And if you made it this far and you haven't given me a follow, go ahead and follow.